For the final section of today's lecture, I just wanted to touch on a few course logistics. Some of the challenges we're all facing, some of the expectations I have for your assessment, and a few other points that are important to mention from the outset. So, for this semester, I think the most obvious bit of course logistics is the fact that we are teaching in a time of coronavirus, and we are trying to adapt both students and faculty to a quickly evolving situation. Today, there are only over 500 cases in Victoria, and I'm going to try to do the online workshops and the in person workshops as long as they're feasible. But online teaching, as I'm sure you've all experienced, has its strengths and weaknesses. It has garnered a lot of attention, both in academia and outside. Saw this recent tweet by the US president that suggests that he is not a fan of online education and prefers to do it in person. That is not always possible, and the US is dealing with the same kind of dilemmas that we are figuring here. But then you can also see here from the replies, different people definitely have different takes about the costs and benefits of doing it. I've been teaching online off and on since 2011. There's definitely strengths and weaknesses to it. My goal is to try to make the best of it. You will hopefully see an evolution in these lectures and the workshops over the course of the semester as I become more comfortable and familiar with the format, and you as students as well. So I'm really interested. I think there's a lot of cool things that we can try, but it's going to be a learning experience for all of us. And there are no shortcuts, right? Malcolm Gladwell, in one of his influential books, suggested that it takes 10,000 hours to get truly good at anything, including, I guess, from this photo, driving trucks in certain areas. I have no idea if this is actually real or not, but I want to believe that it is, right? In this class, there are no shortcuts, both for me as an instructor and you as a student. The obvious statement, right? Like water. Sometimes it's important to kind of recognize those things that we deal with so often that you might kind of lose meaning. One is, of course, grade distributions, assessment, what the expectations are, and what the final product will look like. I don't know if anyone else has done this for their classes. Last year, I gathered all the final marks from all the students that I had taught at the ANU, almost 3,000 by that time. And what you see is something approximating the bell curve, right? The normal distribution of marks, centered at around 66 to 68 for final marks. I have noticed, it is my experience or my perception, that students often give themselves the marks as much as we give them. There are, of course, individual preferences for instructors for certain approaches or certain argumentation styles, but I think the basic nuts and bolts of doing well in a class, listening to the lectures, participating in discussions, thinking deeply about the material, including the readings, how they all kind of fit together and synthesize it. That is basically the expectations that I have in my class, and I think a lot of people have for their classes. But it's hard, it takes time. And the student surveys every year, including this year, make clear that it's hard to spend the time and focus. And a lot of you are taking a lot of classes at any one time. I want to be transparent about how the grades are calculated in this class. There's details in the course guide. I've made clear what the rubric is. I will give feedback on every single student's papers. I don't have a tutor here, and with over 125 students enrolled in the class so far, I'm going to be busy in those weeks and trying to turn around and give useful feedback to your assessments within a reasonable amount of time. So I want to be transparent and to use the institutions that the university has generated to help me kind of guide myself towards that. I have no idea if the university is going to be using traditional CELTs or whether they're going to be generating something else or not have them at all. But I think there are obvious flaws to lecturer surveys. There's a whole literature on it. In case you're curious, you can go to Google Scholar and find it. But in looking at what the university values, I think it captures parts of what I think a lot of us value when we're actually trying to teach. Clear expectations, activities that support your learning, access to the resources that you need to actually take the class and to do your research, appropriate assessment that is related to the course material and evaluates the learning that you've done in the class, and feedback that supports your learning. I think the feedback, especially for the first two assessments, is going to be crucial in making sure that we all work together towards creating the best papers possible. Because in this class, I think one of the coolest things is seeing the final product at the end of the semester, that I work with students in thinking generally about big ideas in literature, narrowing down the focus to a research proposal. Often it can be the hardest part is writing those 500 words in that small proposal, because it forces you to decide what you're doing and what you're not doing, and then reading the final product. I feel that that is something that I want you to be able to be proud of. Some of my students publish their research papers for this class in undergraduate journals. I just got an email from a Yale journal that was looking for undergraduate submissions. There's a bunch of these kind of journals out there. So I want to make sure that it's worth your while, that I'm trying to be the best instructor that I can be in order to enable you to be the best, and get the most out of this class. Because your time here is not going to be that long, and I want to make sure that you make the most of it, because it will affect the path that you take going forward. Doing all this while all the craziness is going on outside is a challenge. I looked at the other classes in Spear, and mine was the only one that's a hybrid that's trying to do some of this in person. Some people are doing online live lectures, some are doing pre-recorded. I find it easier to be structured and make sure the points are brought across, and increased flexibility as much as possible by recording the lectures, because I know a lot of you are available at different times of the day. It can be hard. A lot of you even have course clashes even during this semester. So I'm trying to maximize the flexibility for those of you who are in Canberra or those of you in other time zones, and I want to make sure that we make the most of the workshops as well. I'll have more details about the workshops Tuesday night and into Wednesday, and it's an ongoing process, right? So try to get feedback. I'm more than eager to get your feedback within the class. There are university procedures in place to try to get feedback outside the class. So for this class, like in all other classes, I need student representatives. Those of you who email me after 3 p.m. on Wednesday to give everyone an equal shot, whether you're in person or a different time zone, I will put your names and emails on the course website, and students who want to give feedback, not necessarily to me, but to the head of my school, or to the College of Arts and Social Sciences. I think they being a student representative is a really useful and important role. The next couple slides in the lecture notes, the PDF and the PowerPoint give more detail about from Anusa about the role of being a student representative. I wanted to just conclude by finishing where I started. These are the slides there, with those four primary elements, right? Earth, air, fire, and water. We are going to be looking at the fundamentals and the topics that we're looking at to try to understand some of the most important challenges we are going to face over the next decade and the next couple decades, right? Hopefully, I've been able to answer the basic questions I started. Why is it worth taking your time? The earth is changing. People are fighting each other still centuries for millennia. They're still doing it. We're in an unprecedented era of plenty, but in some countries, like even the U.S., life expectancy is declining, and there's a huge inequality. How do these environmental, social, and political factors intersect, and how can we understand the relationships between them? How do we understand what is going on in the world? You can look at the day to day, but we also want to understand these background structural forces. And I touched a little bit on conflict, try to define the term and show a few initial trends. But in the workshops, we're going to get more detail into it, as well as the second section of the class. In the workshops, we're going to focus more on the readings that talk about the causes of conflict. I'm really excited to start this class. Every year, the class is different. This is going to be no exception. So let's get started. I am going to have the last video be REM playing us out, as well as an extra bonus track. So come hell or high water, pandemic, fire, or water or wind, has it been today, is not going to let us get in the way of continuing on this journey. So let's do it.